So who I am is, if you ask me who I am, I'm a resilient individual, and that's my card, and what I do is the work that I do, but and I think that at that moment, when I was in that moment, I was equating what I did with a being and a sense of worth. And when I didn't have that, then my sense of worth started to decrease, and there were so many issues in there. So I think that a lot of the work that I had to do was mental more than physical. And I think that a lot of times that's what people struggle with is the mindset and the stories that we tell ourselves that get in the way of achieving what we naturally can do easily.
The goal of the Best You podcast is to allow you to feel confident about what you need to do, why you need to do it, and how to do it in order to get closer and closer to your best you. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Best You podcast. Today, we got a special interview. I'm super excited to be joined by the one and only Dr. Luis Velasquez. Dr. Luis Velasquez, just want to start off by saying thanks so much for joining me here this afternoon.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And drop the doctor. I'm just Luis.
Okay, sounds good, Luis. I appreciate it. Well, we were connected through Dory Clark, who I recently had on the show, and I know that anybody that Dory recommends is going to has a lot of value to bring to the table. So I'm really excited to talk to you today. I want to kind of start off, me personally, I wasn't able to get too much clarification on a lot of your story, so I want to get a little bit more clarification on your story and your background. I know you grew up in Guatemala and in Central America, so talk to me a little bit about kind of about growing up and when you moved to the United States, and we'll start there.
All right, so thank you. As I said, thank you for asking me to be in this podcast, and you will see that a lot of my story is very emotional to me, so I might drop a one tear or one. I grew up in Guatemala in a time that it was very violent, political violence, and needless to say, we were in extreme poverty. We will go to school, and literally sometimes we would have to step over dead bodies because the violence there was very brutal. We're talking about the 80s, when the communists and the capitalism were the Cold War, which was fought in Central America. So it was very, very sad. What was very interesting for me, and I didn't know that until I came to the States, is that was hard from the perspective of other people. But where I had a very happy childhood. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's like, wow. People tell me, man, that must be very hard. And yeah, but I didn't feel it. I really had a happy childhood. And I think that I owe it to my parents in terms that they were always giving us the opportunity to dream. And one of their biggest questions was, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? So that gives me an opportunity to dream, you see what I'm saying, and to imagine things. And that started to materialize, when at the end of the word, obviously, there were the United States and Russia and wanted to do some damage control, for that matter. And the United States created a scholarship fund for young individuals from those areas of conflict. And the idea was to bring them to the United States, give them education, sell them on the idea of the democratic values and whatnot, and then go back to our countries and be beacons of light, of change. And that's exactly how I came here. I went back
through a college scholarship.
Yeah, I came on a scholarship to go through a community college.
Okay.
And
so about 18 years old.
I was 17.
17, Cap.
And what I was going to mention is that my world at that time was as big as the next mountain that I had to cross to go somewhere else. I didn't know any better. And I think that is one of the things that I learned, that a lot of times we don't know what is possible because we don't know what is there. So when I came to the States, I realized, oh my gosh, all the things that I could do personally. So at the end of the scholarship, I realized, I had to fulfill my commitment. I went back to Guatemala and I fulfilled my commitment to stay 3 years there. And then I decided I need to figure out a way to get back to the States or somewhere else, and I think that I couldn't afford it, so I went to every single embassy in Guatemala to see if there were opportunities for students, and I got 3 scholarships: one for the United States, one for Australia, and one for Israel. The difference between all of those 3 is that in the United States it was a full ride. It's literally a full ride. They will pay for absolutely everything. The Australian one was great, but I had to pay my way to get there and insurance, and I didn't have money. So I came to the States on a scholarship again, and I went to Florida A&M University, and here is another part of my story, is that I realized that since then, I've been working or trying to understand people that are different from me. So when I moved to Florida, obviously, I don't know if you're familiar with Florida and A&M University. It's a historically Black university. And in my naive, like, where are the white students? I was thinking when I arrived there, and then I thought, oh, maybe right now, today is for Black students to register and tomorrow is for white students to register. And the next day came, and it was the same. But it was an amazing experience, And then I went to Florida State University as well, which is the same university right there, and I did my master's, and then I was recruited to do a PhD by Michigan State. So I went to Michigan State, and then my dream was to become a professor. He said, I want to become a professor, which I did. I became a professor of fungal genetics at Michigan State University. So I got a PhD in molecular biology and biochemistry. And then I did a postdoc at Rice University and became a professor of fungal genetics at Michigan State. Then, as you can imagine, sometimes we think that we have it all figured out. And then in the process, I bought a house, I got married, and I thought that I had it made. And then I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. When I came back from the brain tumor, the surgery and everything else, the doctor told me, you have to accept your new reality. And your new reality is that you probably won't be back to work for a long time, So basically, you have to forget about being a professor for a while. And you probably won't walk straight anymore. So that was 100 marathons ago, and several ultramarathons that I've run, and Ironman Triathlons. And I think that another principle by which I live now is that I think that the world belongs not to the people that know the most, but to the people that learn the fastest. And that's what I have learned to do, is to learn. Is not, people don't hire me for what I know or what I've been, but what I can do for them. So when they say doctor, it doesn't really matter to most people. It's the doctor title is for me. I want to feel important. For you, it doesn't matter. For you is, can I help you? And yeah, so I now live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm married to a beautiful woman. We're raising 2 multicultural children. She's African American, very successful, and I'm happy. And I work with incredible people, and for some reason, I gotta say, I feel very grateful that people want to work with me. So here I am talking to you. Thank you.
That is an awesome story. Like, I was so riveted by the entire thing. You do a really good job of telling it and hitting the important parts. I kind of want to go back to a couple kind of just questions I'm curious about. When you first moved, had you learned English before you moved, or did you have to learn that alongside kind of going to school?
I actually no, but it's funny, when I was when I took my first job in Guatemala, I work in a farm, and I had to walk from the house to where I had to work. It was about maybe like half a mile through the woods. And so I walk, and I would pretend that I knew English. So I will speak in gibberish, flash, 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 because I knew that I was going to go somewhere. I had no idea where. I had no idea what it would look like, but I knew that I was going to go somewhere. I was optimistic about that component. So when I came to the States, I didn't know any English. So the first thing that I did is I went to a host family, and the host family was very gracious and incredibly helpful to teach me. But one thing that I remember, there are two things that I remember. One time, my host mother asked me to go and buy ice cream, and I was like, no. And I said, no, you need to go, because she was forcing me to use English. And I think that a lot of times we try to find our comfort zone, and what makes us grow is feel uncomfortable. So that's one component. The other memory that I have is, as I was, learning to read, the teacher asked us to find a book to read and do a book report. So I went to the library. I kid you not. I picked a shelf random, and I said to myself, I am going to pick the thickest book that I can find in that one. And I went and I picked the Count of Monte Cristo.
Wow.
Huge. I couldn't hold it. I had to put it in my chest to read it. But what I'm thinking is that the way I operate, the way I think that it has worked for me, is that I go to extremes. I do things that are difficult. People say, why you do that? I said, pain is my friend. Kind of like I know that I can do more than most people think that I can.
That's awesome. So it sounds like a lot of that was probably due to how your parents raised you. You said that your parents raised you guys to dream and to think about what you have the ability to accomplish, and that's what led to such a positive childhood for you guys, and that led you to be naturally optimistic person, because you just had this kind of unfound belief that you were going to be able to go somewhere and make something of yourself. You didn't know what that was going to look like, but for some reason that was deep-seated in you, and very likely because of the way that your parents raised you. So tell me about, extract some of the things that they did to help kind of morph you into that kind of person that now maybe you try to do in your parenting with your kids.
There are many things that they did, but I think that there are three things that my parents did. Number one is that they adapted. We were always figured out, and we didn't have an option. You see what I'm saying? We had to figure out a way to do things. The other thing that we did, and I remember this, is that we reframe things quite a bit. And what I mean reframe things quite a bit is that we try to look at things that are bad in a different, with a different light. And I remember one of my first memories. My dad used to go to, he was a truck driver, so he would go to, for days at a time, driving his truck. And I grew attached to him. So for me, it was hard to let him go. So he invented a game, and he said, let's play hide and seek. I hide and you seek. And so he will do that whenever he needed to leave, and he will go. He said, what was interesting to me is that I knew that he was gone, but I kept looking for him the day after and the day after, the day after. You know what I'm saying? So reframing things for me has been a very incredible coping mechanism. And so that's the other thing. The other thing that my parents did is that my dad was a spanker. He spanked me, but he never spanked me for no reason. You see what I'm saying? And it was one of those things that he will tell me, tonight you're getting spanked. So I had the whole day to think about what I did. You know what I'm saying? And they never told us not to do anything. My dad, I remember, a couple of when my brother my youngest brother was in his, formative years and trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. He said, Daddy, I'm going to go to the States. I'm going to go. And the only way that he could come here is if he would come illegally, because, that's the way for him. That's the way for us. I am the only one that came with a visa and everything. Now things have changed. Everybody comes here, but that took a long time. But at that time, there is no way that he could come with a visa or anything. So he said, I'm going to go illegally. And my dad said, okay, go. How much do you need? What do you need? And I don't know, it was equivalent to $1,000 or something like that. And my dad, at that time, he was already having his own business. I went, no, he gave me money. And he said, go. So he went, and I think that he went the first morning, and he went to the Mexican frontier, the border. The next day he came back, and he said, Daddy, I don't want to go anymore. So my dad said, okay, so what are you going to do about this then? What are you going to do? And so he said, I want to work with you, So I said, no, you're not going to work with me. You're going to work on your own. So he gave me some help. And my brother now is one of the most successful businessmen of my time. But my point is that I think that my dad and my mom never put blocks for us to go somewhere. I'll give another example that I think that is relevant. Every time that I go back, I go visit the family of a really good friend of mine, and he lives in Los Angeles. And one time I asked him, so why don't you go visit your parents more often? And she goes, well, every time I go there, my mom starts crying, and I don't want to break her heart. So when I went to visit her, she told me, I am so sad because he took off. He should have stayed here with us, because even though we were poor, we will be together. You see what I'm saying? Even though we're suffering, but we'll be together. My dad had a different idea. He said, just go find your thing. And I think that a lot of parents, especially in Latin America, that's the idea, is that, let's stay together. Let's suffer together. My dad is like, no, I don't want you to suffer like I'm suffering. Go find your things. And my family, thank God, has been a model for me. I am the least successful of the family. It's been so inspirational to see them grow.
Wow, that's so cool. I wrote down a number of things that you said there. The kind of 4 things. One, y'all's ability to adapt, and we might get more into that here soon. But 2, reframing things. I talk about that a decent amount. I think it's just so important to realize why bad situations can actually happen for you and not to you. And then you said, kind of what I wrote down, how I phrased it, was accountability with reason. He was a spanker, but it was never for no reason. It was for a specific reason. And so you learn from it. And then lastly, you talked about how your parents never held you back from doing anything. They always said, go. And they said, go. And we're okay with you guys stepping into uncharted waters and getting out of your comfort zone, because it's so easy for the people that you care for to kind of hold them back because you are scared for their safety, and you can convince yourself it's the best thing to do to keep them safe, but it's really the worst thing that you can do from them, because you're shackling them from the person that they could become. And so that's great. Those were some awesome lessons that you have learned and are hopefully applying as well as a father. I kind of want to dive in, but just to get more context before I ask the question, how old were you when the brain tumor, you were diagnosed with a brain tumor? How old were you?
I was at that time 33 years old.
33 years old. Was that before you had started doing the marathons, Ironmans, and stuff like that?
Yeah.
That was before any of that?
Yep.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about that then. You have done hundreds of races up to this point, and it was all after the brain tumor. Now, break down when that diagnosis came in. What was the process that you went through in your head that then sparked you to go do all of these crazy races? We'll be back to the interview in just a second, but first I wanted to share some words from a participant of the 10-week transformation. At Best You, we started running the 10WT back in January of 2020 and have since had 313 people and counting go through it. They've seen their bodies get stronger than ever before, they've seen the stubborn fat finally come off, and they've seen their habits dramatically improve. And honestly, more than anything, they've seen their self-confidence skyrocket. If you want to learn more about the 10-week transformation, then you can go to nickcarrier.com/10WT. That's nickcarrier.com/10WT. We'll get back to the show in just a second, but first, here's what they had to say.
My name's Maddie. I joined Nick's 10-week program because I had a friend who'd been doing classes with Orange Theory and really liked it. I was just looking for something to kind of kickstart myself back into working out. Lost 20 pounds. Definitely I'm seeing a lot more muscle. Definitely just able to lift a lot bigger weights. Definitely the social aspect. Everyone's really fun. I work night shifts, so like coming in after a hardship, it's a nice like decompression and it's really fun.
Nice. Then last thing, just repeat after me. You should join Nick's 10-week program.
You should join Nick's 10-week program.
Wow, that's a. I think that for me, as I said, I think that I'm always thinking. I categorize the problems. Damn, this is a little bit difficult for me to conceptualize because that question is very loaded. You have to edit all of this off right now because I think that what I see things in buckets. I have a simple mind that I tend to bucket things, and I see the things on this component is one bucket that I call gravity problems, and the other that I call situational problems. And gravity problems are like gravity, you cannot solve those. You cannot solve those problems at all. The situational problems are that you have control over, right? And I think that going back to how did I became the person that I am in terms of the races, I didn't have an idea that I wanted to run a 100-mile race at that moment. That wasn't even my radar. My only purpose was to get better. You see what I'm saying? I just want to get better. And so when I was diagnosed and the doctor gave me those grim, news, and the world started to collapse, the wife left, and all the things that I mentioned. Well, actually, my wife left after I ran my first marathon, and in fact, she ran it with me. So she was a great support at the beginning. And how did I do that? I think that it goes back to the motivation. My motivation was to get better. I just want to get better. And so everything that they told me to do, I will do it 10x. The doctor, the therapist said you have to walk in the morning and in the afternoon. I will walk the morning and the afternoon. You see what I'm saying? So I will do it. I'll do everything extra. And I think that I was on my ex-wife and I were invited to a wedding. Just the day that I was diagnosed, and the wedding was to be taken in Chicago. And so we went to Chicago. Imagine, I was just diagnosed. I was already thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna die. My wife was thinking, oh my God, he's gonna die. What's gonna happen? Blah blah blah. And so, but we decided to go to the wedding anyway. We already paid for it, so we went to the wedding. The next day was the Chicago Marathon. So I decided, why don't we just go and do the Chicago Marathon? See the Chicago, just watch the race. So we decided to go and watch the race. And then something happened that day to me that I got inspired by all the runners that were, crossing the finish line. And a lot of them had signs: brain tumor survivor, cancer survivor, domestic violence survivor. There were like many survivors, and I was like, holy crap, I can do that too. So I said to my wife, I want to do this. Next year, you and I are going to do it. And then she starts crying, oh my God, what are you thinking? You don't know if you're going to be alive next year. What, you should be thinking about the brain tumor. I said, no, I want to do this next year, and you're going to do it with me. Let's do this. And then we shook hands. I said, okay, let's do it. So that became my motivation later. You see what I'm saying? When I was in the pit of, the recovery, I said, I have a marathon to run. So I started calling my recovery my marathon journey. You see what I'm saying? And I ran my first marathon in Chicago exactly just over a year after I was, I did my, my brain surgery. From that, it became a slippery slope. And then I ran another marathon and another marathon, and they became a source of fulfillment for me. So now there is a dark side on that, and I'm telling you that what's happening, because when I realized that I couldn't be a professor anymore, and when my marriage crumbled, and when I questioned my own identity, and all of those things, the only thing that I could find solace in is running. So I found running as a therapy for me, and I found running as a way to recover and a way to recharge. The races and everything else was just an outcome. I never focused on the races. I focused on the running itself. So that's what I've been doing all along. I don't know if that answers your question. It's a long-winded question.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. That was awesome. Very inspiring. I love how essentially the day after your diagnosis, you saw the runners and you were inspired and then took action. Tell me a little bit about what kind of the recovering process of having a brain tumor was like. Were you in and out of a hospital a decent amount, getting treatment? I'm not too familiar with what that process looks like.
Yeah, so the first time that I realized there was something wrong is because my wife came into the house and said, why is the TV so loud? And I am like, what do you mean it's loud? It's not loud. I said, yes, it is loud, and then she went and turned it off. And then she said, you have a hearing problem? And for a long time, she kept accusing me that I wasn't listening to her. The problem is that I wasn't hearing her. So went to see the doctor. And at this time, I am in perfect shape. I wasn't having any symptoms other than the hearing. And when they went and the doctor told me, hearing is losing the hearing is common for people that have genetic issues or are exposed to problems of loud noises or stuff like that. And none of them has happened. So, and there was another potential reason was a brain tumor, but the doctor said, no, that's very rare. No, I don't think so. Come back in 6 months. And then my ex-wife and I already did some really heavy research the day before, why are the reasons of brain tumor? And we told the doctor, hey, do you think that is the brain tumor? He said, no, I don't think so. And then we said, well, can we make sure that is not the case? Can you order an MRI? And he said, no. And we're like, okay, so we walk out, and then this is something that I remember very vividly. My wife at the door came back and she said, we need an MRI. Either you order from us or we'll find someone that will. And so he was like shocked, because I guess doctors in small towns, don't expect patients to talk to them like that. So anyway, so he ordered the MRI, and that was on Tuesday. On Friday, he called us, tell the news. What was interesting is that the moment I knew that I had a brain tumor, all the symptoms became evident. I've been having them alone, but I never associated them with brain tumor. And in my mind, I was allergies, and I always pride myself. I have a big what is it? My threshold for pain is higher, so I can handle this. It's fine. And then all of a sudden, knowing that I had a brain tumor, then, oh my gosh, all of the things became much more evident. And the biggest things that happened is that I started to change, my personality started to change. I was more aggravated. I was, like angry and all of those things. After the diagnosis, after the brain surgery, because of the location of the tumor, they have to go through my cerebellum, which controls the balance, the stability, and obviously, they had to move things around there, and they also took they took the tumor, but they did some poking around. So I lost some cognitive issues, cognitive faculties that, thank God, have recovered. Some have recovered fully. Other ones, if you give me your phone number, I will remember the first digit. So I'm a writer. I have to take notes, which is like a way to go. But yeah, and it affected me in different ways. But that was very interesting and just incredibly humble. One of them is that I remember this. I lost my ability to write and type, but I could read. Wow. So I had to learn how to write. I lost my ability to voluntarily pee. So for months I had to force myself, to put a catheter in there to pee. The minute I pee on my own, that was, you have no idea how much I cry. And now I go to pee, man. I kid you not, I enjoy every drip of it because I know how it's like not to be able to do that. And so the recovery was long, was very long. And mostly is recovering the faculty, the cognition faculties, but also there is another component of that, and is that completely erodes your identity, especially when you feel that you have reached a level of success. You got your PhD, you're a professor, and then all of a sudden you cannot do that anymore. It challenges your identity completely. And then in my case, that I was, that a lot of times, I was equating who I was with what I did. So now I separate those two things. Who I am is different from what I do. Yeah. So who I am is, if you ask me who I am, I'm a resilient individual, and that's my card. And what I do is the work that I do, but and I think that at that moment, when I was in that moment, I was equating what I did with a being and a sense of worth. And when I didn't have that, then my sense of worth started to decrease, and there were so many issues in there. So I think that a lot of the work that I had to do was mental more than physical. And I think that a lot of times that's what people struggle with is the mindset and the stories that we tell ourselves that get in the way of achieving what we naturally can do easily.
Yeah, no doubt. That last part is really key. So many of us find ourselves falling in the trap of identifying ourselves with what we do. Or I'm a fitness trainer as well, and a lot of people I coach have weight loss goals, and oftentimes people tie their identity too much up in the number that pops up on the scale, and they feel bad about themselves because of that number. But what I try to always tell people and remind people of is you are not the number on the scale, but your identity is formed from what you repeatedly do. And like you said, you are a person of resilience. That is who you are. That's because you repeatedly do difficult things that get you out of your comfort zone, but you do them anyway and you overcome them. And so same thing with all of you guys listening. You are not your job. You are not how much money you make. You are not the number on the scale. Those are just simply outcomes. Those are the races that you shouldn't necessarily put all your focus on. We need to put a focus on the process and what we're repeatedly doing on a day in and day out basis.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's exactly what I believe and what I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's powerful. The last thing I want to kind of touch on before we wrap it up is we had talked beforehand how Dory connected us, and you had mentioned how you originally were introduced to her by reading her book when you were trying to figure out like what you were doing with your life and what you wanted to do from a career standpoint moving forward and what your purpose was. Talk to us a little bit about your journey through trying to, I'm assuming this was after brain tumor and trying to figure out so bring us through a little bit of your journey of trying to redefine what you were going to do from a work standpoint, a career standpoint moving forward with your life, and what allowed you to do that, because there's a lot of people listening right now who are not liking what they're currently doing and they want to transform their career or they want to do something else, but they're not sure what the heck they should do. And so I hope that they can learn a little bit through your process.
So again, if you think about, Doris, how Doris showed into my life and how I took advantage of what I learned from her is that I could define my expertise. And she has a program, it's called the Recognized Expert. And the idea that what I learned from her is that we all are experts at something. We just need to figure out what expertise is. And the way I see it, there are 3 ways that you can actually become an expert. Number 1 is you do the research. Number 2, you write about it and you interview people. So that's you get expertise of that. And number 3 is you are in the field living it. That I am the third kind. You see what I'm saying? And to tell you the truth, this idea of resilience, I had no idea what that meant or how it applied to me. I never thought of that, me as a resilient individual in the past. The way I describe this is, as I was talking to Dory, and she said to me, you're an expert or something. Let's figure out what it is. It happens that one time I was sitting in a lunch with a very recognized author. His name is Jim Kouzes. He wrote the book, The Leadership Challenge. And he and I, started the conversation. And basically, he asked me the same questions that you asked me today, pretty much. And I told him the story. And he said, Luis, you need to write that down. You need to write that down. And I am like, I'm not a writer, No, you need to write it. And it doesn't matter, Like he said, just write your stories. So I said, okay, so I being the committed person that I am, I decided to start writing my stories. So I wrote a bunch of them, but they were not connected in any way. It's just like, this time when I did my first Ironman, or this time when I was in training for my first 100-mile race, stuff like that, or even, my first memory, and so I wrote all those stories, and then I told him, hey, listen, I finished writing the story. And then he said, oh yeah, well, tell me about these stories. And he said, obviously I won't be able to read them all, but tell me about this story. So I told him, tell me about this story. I told him. 5 files became evident. And he said, Luis, that is your book. And I'm like, holy crap. And I realized that that's how I have been living my life. Those are the 5 things that I do that have allowed me to adapt and thrive. And that is what I call my resilience pillars. And for me, it's number 1 is embrace the suck. Going back to what I said earlier, is like a lot of times, we think that we want to get better, and we focus on the resources that we need to get there. Oh, if I only had the money for the membership, or if I only had a better boss, or if I only had that, if I only had this. And I think that by doing that, we are not embracing the place where we are. And the reality is that where we are is where we're supposed to be, period. And we should be happy where we are. So that's number 1. The other was about pile that came is, if you look at my stories, there is a lot of fear in many of them. Like living in violence, and poverty, coming to the United States, not knowing English, all of us, there is a lot of fear in every single thing here. And then I realized that my goal has never been to be fearless, but to fear less, but do it anyway. Mm-hmm. So throughout my stories, it's like, okay, oh my God, I'm going to do this. What is the best? What is my low-hanging fruit to get started? You see what I'm saying? And so it's not about not being afraid, but to fear less. So that's number 2. The other component that I realized is that if I look at all the pivotal moments of my life, there has been one person there that has either helped me, pushed me, criticized me, left me. There is always one person that has catalyzed. So I think that we are the product of our interactions. And so many of these people have made an incredible difference in my life. So going back to my purpose now as a coach is like, I want to be that person for as many people as I can. So that's number 3 is, build, you cannot do life alone. Number 4 is what I call, the find your inner strength. And the way I see it is that everybody, I am in the place where I need to be, period. It doesn't matter what I did. This is what I am. And it is nothing wrong with me, but I always have the ability to get better. And I have everything that I need to take the first step. It doesn't matter what you want to do. You already have everything that you need to take the first step. So the key for me is to take the first step and get momentum. Once you start, then momentum takes care of itself. But having said that, there are things that that we need to work on. I call it like 4 to 5. Anyway, so that's one, is that you have everything that you need to get started, but you still have to train and get better. I call it my mental capacity, reading, learning, whatever, spiritual capacity. I always try to find reasons to be grateful for. Going back to your question, what made you smile today? What is not to smile about? And also, the find your inner strength. You got to move. My wife tells me, go exercise because you're a better husband when you're tired.
That's awesome.
And the reality is that it does. I go exercise, I go run, and I am in such a better mood, so it changes my mentality. And the last part of the 5 elements is purpose. It's like a lot of times going back to what you said earlier about a lot of people focus on what they need to do versus who they want to be. I want to be a great father. I want to be the best manager for everybody. I want to be fit. And that fitness is relative. But this so anyway. So the 5 components is relationships, embracing the suck, facing your fears, finding your inner strength, and find your purpose. So all of that I have learned through this journey. And now that is part of my coaching practice, and my what I have a what I call a resilient formula, and my resilient formula that works for me is commitment plus persistence times optimism. Times optimism, because optimism is a multiplier. If you're not optimistic because you don't see what is there, then those are the people that they're just doing it because they have to do it, and they're checking the box. It's so I don't know. So it's been a great journey. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to figure.
That's awesome, though. That's awesome. I think one of the biggest takeaways that I even just got from that across your great 5 pillars is, when you were trying to figure out what it is that you were going to do, you had to kind of dissect your own story, and you had to dissect what got you to where you currently were, and extract kind of your expertise out of that, and then use that expertise in the service of others. So just want to acknowledge you for that. Before I ask the last question, I just want to acknowledge you for your ability to do the difficult things, even when situations and circumstances don't present themselves in an ideal manner. And I think you've done an amazing job of that.
Thank you. And the thing that I want to clarify is that, I'm finishing this book right now, and the premise of the book is the following: if we want to act differently, we need to think differently, and we need to think. If in order for us to think differently, we need to see differently. So there is two or three sides of the story for everything. What we need to do is figure out what side motivates us and what side is going to not motivate us to move forward.
Yeah, that's good.
And so it's what I've seen a lot of times is that people that feel that they don't have a choice, when you reframe things for them, they see that they have a choice, and man, the possibilities open.
Oh yeah, no doubt. That's great. Like you said, your actions are based off of kind of your thoughts, and which are based off of what you see or your perspective, and that's so important to be able to kind of reverse engineer that. So that's great. Well, I know everybody's going to want to learn about that book when it comes out. Ordinary Resilience, right?
That's the key.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure that people get notified about that. I'll make sure I share about it when it does come out and everything like that. Also, you guys can go look up Luis's website at velascoaching.com, and I'll have that linked up in the show notes as well. But Luis, last question here is that I think getting closer to the best version of yourself is a constant journey. I don't think that we actually ever get to that best version, and I also think it's a unique journey. I think the way that I'm going to get closer to the best version of myself is going to be a little bit different than the way that you get closer to the best version of yourself. So this last question is for you personally. If there are 3 things that you could currently do or 3 things that you could currently work on to get closer to that best version of Luis Velasquez that you could possibly be, then what are those 3 things that you could currently do or currently work on?
That's a loaded question. I wasn't prepared for that question. So one of the things that I think that I need to let go of my fear of being wrong, and that's holding me quite a bit. And I think that I need to work on that. I need to redefine my risk limit. Because right now, I am cruising. Thank God, life is good for me. I mean, work is great. Family is awesome. So I'm almost seeing myself going to pre-diagnose, and so I think that you ask a very interesting question here. What is it that I need to do right now to disrupt myself and to elevate my performance without going through the brain tumor again?
Right.
So that's number 2. And number 3, I think that I need to I need to figure out a way to reach out to more people, to reach more people.
That's awesome.
So if you think about this, the 3 things that I mentioned are driven by what I consider my fulfillment. My purpose is to reframe things for as many people as I can.
That is good. That's a good purpose statement right there. Reframe things for as many people as you can. That's solid. Well, those were 3 really good things. I love the redefine your risk limit. I think so many of us can sometimes slip into like just kind of what you're doing and slip into the rhythm of things, but you got to redefine that risk limit. You got to redefine what area of discomfort you're going to step into next. But Luis, that was amazing. Learning more about your story was super inspiring. For you to be able to move to the United States at the age of 17 without having spoken English and make a name for yourself, and then come back and then still find a way to get back to the United States and then overcome the brain tumor and do all these races and have the resilience that you have had the ability to have and adapt the way that you've been able to adapt is just so inspiring. So I know everybody was really inspired as well. I'm looking forward to your book, Ordinary Resilience, and I know that everybody will look forward to hear when it comes out as well. But Luis, that's all we got today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Nick. I really appreciate the opportunity.